Greetings, my name is Jace Hargis, and this is the second part of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning that I'd like to run through a little bit deeper and a little more systematic, and that these are some of the steps that for those that are interested and they have an idea, we'll walk through exactly step by step, very quickly, some of the things that you want to think about in the order that you might want to think about them. From your hypotheses or your problem statement, your research statement, however you want to frame that, to a design, to your collection instruments, to actually writing this and how you write that, the lit review, intro, methods, results, discussion, and then lastly, your abstract. So I'll go through a slide of each one of these and hopefully give you some ideas and maybe some insights on how to approach this next. So first of all, obviously you need some sort of a question. And this question works best in SoTL when it's an authentic question. And so I encourage faculty to not to sit down and think about a SoTL project, but to really take some notes whenever they're in class and when they're teaching or when they have office hours or when something comes up and you simply are like, why didn't that work? Or why did that work? Or why do students keep asking these questions? Or how do I assess better? Or how can I be more consistent in this? These are authentic, really key questions. And so jot some of those things down. The more authentic, the more real, the better all of this data kind of works out. Definitely make sure that it's feasible. With SoTL, unlike some research, we like to really take kind of a very intensive focus on what we're collecting for the data as opposed to dragging it out. When you drag out this kind of research, we have some things that happen called maturation and mortality, which simply means that we may lose some of our participants and they may naturally mature or learn things outside of the class, which then adds a bit of a confounding variable. Obviously, it's helpful if it's worthwhile, more people are going to read those, and the bottom line is to be original from your ideas in your classroom. Many types of experimental designs. I'm just going to point out these four just to kind of get you thinking about these. And obviously this is a very deep, complex topic, so I apologize for oversimplifying. But these four basically come up the most. There's what's called true four-part Solomon design, experimental design. And the key difference here is that your participants, your subjects, are randomly assigned. This allows us to have increased power when we're doing statistical analysis. But I do want to caution you that even though you may not have the control to do that, and you may not have an actual experimental control, don't worry too much about that. A quasi-experimental will allow you still to do a lot of the things that would be considered normal curricula within your classroom. And there's still a lot of really cool things that you can do with the quasi-experimental. Obviously there's another one that's called correlational, which you're looking at two things, kind of a cause and effect. And then obviously if you have very low numbers, but you're looking to be very deep and rich on those, you can do what's called a case study. So how are we going to collect some data? Obviously, I really try to emphasize that there's two major ways, and then there's obviously some sub-parts of these. But to look at the data as either is it a direct or an indirect measure. Obviously, you would like to find ways to gather as many direct measures, but to have this kind of a portfolio of possibly multiple types of data to triangulate your findings. Direct measures would be some sort of way to look at those student artifacts, their representation of their conceptual knowledge. Portfolios, e-portfolios, or even direct observations that you see them actually working on practicals or analysis. Indirect measures, which are good, but I really would encourage you to make sure that you have at least one direct measure in your SoTL research. Some sort of a survey is fine that's asking them to give some of their thoughts. We know that these can be highly biased and inflated, so we want to make sure that we either do a follow-up focus group, but we should always be thinking about multiple data sets. Selecting a journal, this is always kind of something you want to do up front to think about how you want to actually portray your results. And this could literally be from an informal to formal, first person, third person, electronic, higher tiered, higher impact factor, lower acceptance rates. There's many variables, so really think intensely about what the value is of this to you, your department, your career, and there's definitely some journals that might align to these same kind of things. And I'm happy, there's plenty of people that can have some conversations. There's some great websites out there that line out what each of these journals do. So obviously then you're ready to do some writing, a bit of an introduction. Anyone who's written any paper knows that these are fairly standard formats. You know what it is, a little bit of background of your students, some demographics. The methods actually are going to be really key that you make these in detail because the reader will want to know if they can repeat this results or generalize your results into their setting. Obviously, you want to keep everything kind of anonymous for this double-blind peer review that you'll do when you send this out. So keep all of your institutional information out during the review process, and you can certainly put that in after it's accepted. The results section here, you want to basically just put out the results, obviously as many graphical representations, tables, figures, and summary forms so that people can make those interpretations. Follow the APA guidelines are typically what SoTL journals will be looking for, and as I mentioned at the end here, kind of resist that natural urge to post a result and then interpret. We want to delay any of the interpretations into the discussion and conclusion section. Of which, the discussion and conclusions, this is where you're going to make sense of it all, give the viewer your kind of insights, help them kind of decipher some of the things that you were looking for, share some of the information, and as I mentioned, even data that may not support your hypothesis is still very important. But as I post in the yellow, the three things that I always encourage folks to do is to really think intensely about identifying your variables all along the way. In the conclusion, this is a great place to post those. Try to minimize those before, during, and after. And if you can't do those, the discussion is where you're going to find ways to share how you accounted for those variables or how you might suggest that to be done in further work. Finally, obviously, you want to really check your references. Again, we're using APA. It should have enough, but not too much, and really look at the format of the journals to figure out how much they would like to have for those particular manuscripts. Then, after you're all done with that, and typical wording for APA guidance is 150 to 250, write up a very concise abstract. Most everyone knows how to do these kind of things, but I always kind of recommend that people look at it as how can you quickly tell somebody if they should read more, or if it's work that they may want to work and use those methods in your classroom. Obviously, there's some rules of thumbs on when we might see the acceptance of our manuscripts, but I always encourage people to track and kind of have a conversation with the editors. So thanks again. That was a really brief overview, but I'd love to have further conversations, so don't hesitate to contact me. My name is Jace Hargis, and good luck.